Hello and Happy New Year 2026, and welcome back to Paranormal NL Podcast, located in Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. That's PNL Podcast for short. I'm your host and founder, Jen Noseworthy. Thank you for tuning in to UPRN United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and 105.3 FM on that Gulf. Well, our new year 2026 is 2025, shall we say, is almost over. And, we're soon heading into Groundhog Day in February. Now, for America's Stonehenge special tonight on UPRN segment number 64, I've got a special guest waiting backstage from New Hampshire, USA, and a co-host special guest. I call him the ancient history guru from Texas, USA, who I'll bring on shortly. Now, it's time to grab your ancient civilization jar and pour some of your favorite home brew in it. Grab a few geeky astronomy munchies and get ready for the show tonight. Paranormal NL Podcast is sponsored by the Bog Team. It's a boots-on-the-ground Bog Team doing historical paranormal investigations in Newfoundland, Canada. Follow PNL Podcast and the Bog Team on their Linktree, Paranormal NL Podcast, and smash those subscribe buttons. All Bog Team music heard in the intro and the exit is available for download on all social media and streaming music platforms. Tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on UPRN for PNL Podcast with a YouTube and a Facebook live chat watch party for subscribers. PNL Podcast believes in supporting international paranormal networking and highlighting global paranormal people, places, and things. Now let's get on with the show. Tonight, I thought that I would give a shout out to the guest who introduced me to tonight's guest, and that was Mark Eddy, and he's from Third Eye Live. And Mark was on PNL Podcast Season 3, Episode 53 with our New Year's Eve party, and Mark is also coming back on PNL Podcast in Season 4, Episode 10, so check out Mark Eddy. Now, for tonight's guest, who I'm going to bring on stage shortly, here he is, Mr. Dennis Stone. Welcome, Dennis. And I've got Dr. Judd Burton. Welcome.
Thank you, Jen.
So, Dr. Burton, do you want to start and introduce yourself to the folks listening on UPRN? Dr. Burton is also a PNL Podcast Alumni-Network member and from Texas.
Certainly. My name is Dr. Judd Burton. I'm a historian by trade. I also have degrees in anthropology. And I have done field work in a number of different countries around the world, both anthropological and archaeological. I taught in colleges and universities for 20 plus years and decided to devote my research energies to questions that I thought were more interesting than I could ask in the conventional academic realm. And so I founded the Institute of Biblical Anthropology, which I'm currently the director and senior fellow at with a number of my colleagues and peers. And I have a long, as far as the topic of tonight goes, I have a long-standing interest in the archaeology and history of the Americas.
Well, you got a good topic tonight, Judd. And, welcome back again to Paranormal NL Podcast. And the topic, America's Stonehenge. Tonight we have Dennis Stone. He's the owner and the president from New Hampshire, USA. Dennis, do you want to introduce yourself there before we get rolling along?
Oh, good evening. Yeah, thank you again for having me on the show. Yeah, I'm Dennis Stone, and I'm from living in Salem, New Hampshire, where America's Stonehenge is located. And my family's been involved with this site since 1955. My dad got involved with it that year. He was an engineer at AT&T Bell Labs. In fact, before that, he was a 30-year employee at AT&T Bell Labs. Before that, though, he was actually up in Newfoundland, and he was with the U.S. Coast Guard for a couple of years in the early 50s. And he always had a fascination with history, Native American, Vikings, for instance. And he was there in the early 50s before they found Lonzo Meadow. And if he had known about it at the time, he definitely would have taken a visit to that site. So it was his passion. And after the Coast Guard, he went to AT&T Bell Labs. I was born in 1954, so I was about a year and a half old when he first heard about our site. So 70 years ago is when my family first got involved with this. I went into the airlines. I was an airline captain. I flew for UPS. I flew for American Airlines at the end of my career for 27 years. But my passion was always not only aviation, but it was ancient sites for sure. And the nice thing about the airline, it gave us an opportunity to do quite a bit of traveling, so that was one of the benefits. And in the early days, when I was trying to build up my hours back in the 1970s, I began flying in 1974, just after high school. We would go all over New England and photograph these sites from the air, our site as well as some of the other sites. And I retired 10 years ago from the airlines. And so my family's been involved with this. My wife works at our site. She had a professional corporate world job with Chrysler Financial and TRW. And then she decided in 1993, 1994, just to run our site. And my son Kelsey was born in 1989. And although he's an engineer like my dad, he's a Raytheon engineer working on the Patriot missiles, he's still involved with the site too. And I have a granddaughter, she's 5, and she's also at the place. So it's kind of a family affair at our museum. And we just celebrated our 65th anniversary 2 years ago, and we're heading towards our 70th being open to the public. So it's kind of our background. It's always been history, involved with archaeology, astronomy, and all these other fields, but it's been our passion and love too. But we always had regular jobs or what have you, and we always worked at the museum kind of on the side. Even my mom did. She died just a couple of years ago at 100 years old. So, wow. So it's been kind of a long term and a little tie to Newfoundland. In fact, we visited Newfoundland 2 years ago, and we went up to Lonzo Meadow, and we fell in love with your province of Newfoundland up there. And this year we've been up in Canada a couple times, up in New Brunswick, and we went to Prince Edward Island. We just did Ontario over to Wisconsin and saw some of the ancient mounds in Wisconsin this summer as a little vacation. So it's one of our things we do. We travel and see a lot of these sites too. So.
That's amazing, Dennis. I love that you're in Newfoundland and gave a shout out to Lonzo Meadows.
Yeah, that was amazing. We took our dog with us, and she actually went right around the whole site. She's a Nova Scotia duck-holding retriever, so she was kind of back up in her where her ancestors, I guess, were bred. But in fact, I think she's barking right now downstairs. But yeah, we love traveling, and we just got an RV 2 years ago. We do a lot of flying, but the RV has been another world, and we really enjoy that too. So we camped all the way up to Lonzo Meadow at some of the national parks. We took the ferry across from Sydney over to Port au Basque, and then we drove the 400 miles. It's a pretty big province. I didn't realize how big that was,
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we have some pretty wild weather here too.
It's absolutely beautiful up there too. We really enjoyed that.
It is. So I was just going to say, Dr. Burton, I think I've got you on mute because there's some interference in your background there. But while we're talking, Dennis, you mentioned several different things about America's Stonehenge, and you mentioned, that it was in the family for a long time. I pulled up a shot of this is your dad, correct?
Yeah, that's my dad. Yeah, that's Robert Stone, and I think that picture is probably taken by the looks of his bow tie and his hair, because his hair grew longer in the 60s. That was taken probably around 1960, maybe 61 or something like that. Wow. And he's by what we call the sacrificial table. It's a big 9,000-pound stone with a groove on it. And he's just kind of standing back there for a photo, I guess. And he passed away in 2009, but he was involved with the site from the age of 24 all the way up to his passing. He was about 80 and a half when he passed away. So most of his life was involved with the site.
Can you talk a little bit more about this table, the sacrificial table he's looking at? Like, for example, did you get any more information about which cultures maybe possibly built this?
That's like the $1,000,000 question. We don't have any evidence, of course, that was used for that purpose, ceremonial purposes. A slaughter table, an embalming table, a birthing table have all been different claims to the table. We just don't know. It's about 9 feet long by approximately 6 feet wide, but it's actually bell-shaped. And the groove, which you can see the deep groove with his hand, it looks like a rectangular groove. Only since I retired did we actually, somebody measured it decades ago, but never actually brought it to light that actually is a trapezoid shape. That whole groove pattern is a trapezoid, not rectangular. But it's always been called rectangular by the press, by some of the researchers, And it sits on 4 legs, and it sits right next to the largest chamber called the oracle chamber. It would be to the left side of the picture, but you can't really see it in the picture too well. It's actually, it's on a wall, outside wall of the chamber in ruins that the top of that stone actually goes into. And then there are 4 legs that support it. And when the first researcher actually did the work on the site starting in 1937, William B. Goodwin of Hartford, Connecticut, they began photographing it too. That table looked like it was just sitting on dirt, like on the ground. And by 1938, the second year, they were actually digging down. They found it was actually sitting on 4 stone legs, if you will. And they also found a hollow, rectangular horizontal tube that goes 6 feet from underneath the left side of the table, but underneath it, where you can't see it, it goes into the oracle chamber. And in the oracle chamber side, there's actually a step in the bedrock. They actually removed the bedrock to use it for stone building material to lower the floor, whoever the original builders were. But they left a part of the bedrock there as a step directly below that, what we call the speaking tube. And Mr. Goodwin, when he was in there in 37, they didn't know that that tube was there. It had 2 stone plugs on either side of it, concealing it. And it was discovered inside the oracle chamber in 37. A young man named Paul actually was one of the workers there, and he actually was touching stones and realized it was loose. He went back to what we call the bunkhouse. It was a wooden bunkhouse for the workers to stay at back in 37. And it still exists today in a neighbor's backyard. But he got a knife. He got a knife from the kitchen. He went in there and he wiggled it in between the stones and put together fairly tight, pulled out that block of stone, and he saw what looked like a 6-foot tunnel. And they thought, well, is this some sort of a closet? But it's really long and skinny, horizontal. It was in 38 when they were digging down outside near where my dad's standing there on both sides of the table and all around it. They went down through about 2.5 feet of dirt roughly, and they looked at the wall and they noticed a plug shape because all the stones are 1 over 2 over 1, like when you lay bricks, except that it seemed to be like a square in the wall. So they were like, and they pulled out that block. It was a plug of stone too, and they realized they had a whole hole through the whole thing. And we realized that the hole on the sacrificial tie, which is underneath the stone, is actually flared like a trumpet or a clarinet or some woodwind instrument. They kind of, for acoustics, and that's how that is shaped. I thought that's some sort of a speaking tube. It's certainly not a chimney because it's perfectly horizontal, and it runs 6 feet, and it's kind of about 1 foot by roughly 1 foot, in size as far as height and width. We've been to Malta, and I saw holes in some of the walls in Malta, and I asked the guide what they were for. He said they were for oracles to speak through. And we went to Greece back in '85 on a honeymoon, and we went all of Greece and Rhodes. But in Delphi, they had the oracle stuff there too. The priest that did the oracles and stuff. So it kind of reminds me of that kind of thing, And we've been to Mexico too. And I think there are some holes. It's been a while since we've been to Mexico. We've been down there 3 or 4 times. But I think that chamber was a secret chamber. It's kind of about almost 30 feet in length. And then it has a branch that goes to the east about 18 feet. Okay. And in the north side, south part of it, the walls are stacked vertically with big roof slabs, probably 1,000-pound roof slabs or whatever.
Is this one of the pictures, Dennis?
Oh, that's another picture of the table. In that picture, you can see one of the stone legs there. You can see the flat slab with the leg. That's one of 4 legs, actually. Okay. Kind of right in the middle of the picture. You can see right in the middle of the picture, and you can see the slab. Yeah, and in the right side of the picture, you can see one of the monoliths. It's a very tall monolith. I think it's about 7 feet tall. Yeah, I think there's curses on it right now. It's one of the tall. And there's another one on the opposite side, although I can't see it in the picture. There's like 2 of these monoliths, one on each side of the table. And that's my astronomy professor from around 1979, and he He worked at the Christa McAuliffe Allen Shepard Planetarium at the New Hampshire, it used to be called New Hampshire Votech. But I had him for a teacher back in the late 70s, and he kept coming up for the students until he retired several years ago. And I think he was doing our video, 11-minute video we have on our website.
Yeah.
It's also in our theater.
What's he standing next to here? Is this?
Yeah, you're kind of looking behind him would be the sacrificial table. You'd be looking north, kind of opposite the picture you had up a moment ago. That is that's a two-story structure, but you only seen the upper story of that structure. But his waist probably, if you could, if you could look down in the picture, you can't, but if you could, you'd see the roof slab, which is a 14-ton stone. Granite weighs about 163 pounds per cubic foot. So you do the dimensions, and that thing weighs about 28,000 pounds. You cannot see it in the picture. It's below his waist, if you will. And that's the floor of that structure you're looking at, but it's also the roof of the chamber below it. So it's actually a two-story building there. And again, you can't really see it.
Hard to see. But
yeah, you said this. Yeah, that's one of the monoliths, and these are located anywhere from 300 to 500 feet from the main site where the sacrificial table is, oracle chamber. And we have kind of a center at our site, which is a little unusual because there are about 800 locations from Quebec and Ontario, Canada, down to Virginia. The Hudson Valley is totally loaded with these stone ruins, and Connecticut and Vermont have a vast number of these stone structures too. But ours has almost like a center, and it has a courtyard, it has a plaza, it has all these chambers really close together in 1 acre area. And then around that are these astronomical alignments, and you're looking at, I believe that's the winter solstice sunset taken a few years ago. And we first saw that in 1970. And that avenue was cleared in 1965. 800 feet of trees had to be removed in order to witness that. And the first photograph actually was in 67 by the gentleman who helped open that up, Warren Martell. And Warren's an interesting gentleman. He started as a kid in 63. He started clearing that with an axe back in 65. And the reason we started doing that is a book came out called Stonehenge Decoded by Gerald Hawkins. He's originally from England, and he was at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics in Cambridge, Mass. And he wrote the book in 65, although a paper came out in 63 about Stonehenge being a computer, and it could predict eclipses, because you had the 4 seasons and the lunar alignments. But that triggered the CBS special in 1965 called The Mysteries of Stonehenge. And I think you can still pull that up on YouTube. I saw it in 65. I saw it in 1975. In 75, we went to a library in Nashville, New Hampshire, about 20 miles from here, one of the cities in New Hampshire. We went over there, the staff from America Stonehenge, we all went over there and watched it 10 years after it came out again. So our researchers said these stones are all around the site. And we wonder if they have any astronomical significance. And that there is a LiDAR image done 5 years ago by a gentleman named Tom Elmore from Connecticut. He's a landscape architect with a master's, but he got involved with LiDAR, and he bought a $50,000 handheld LiDAR and contacted us 5 years ago and said, I would like to come up from Connecticut and LiDAR your site. Have you done that? I said, we have some U.S. government LiDAR. It's very poor quality from around 2015 or so, or 2016. It has no resolution. It's very blurry. He goes, mine can see down to a centimeter. I said, we'd love to have you come up. So he came up and he did 15 acres. And those lines that you see are some of the astronomical alignments for the solstices, equinoxes, the lunar alignments, true north and south. And also, you mentioned Groundhog's Day. We have some of the cross-quarter days, too. And the cross-quarter days are days in between the seasons, such as November 1st, August 1st, February 1st, and May 1st. And some of these holidays we still celebrate today, like All Saints Day, which is, the Celts called it Samhain. It looks like Samhain, but Samhain.
Right.
Imbolc is actually right around Groundhog's Day. It's actually, we say February 1st, August 1st. It's actually a little bit later in the month. But for convenience sakes, people go May 1st is May Day, August 1st is Loch Nassa. November 1st is Samhain, or Samhain is the correct word. Samhain is actually the correct way of saying it, not Samhain. But we have those cross-quarter days. So we have about 57 alignments that we know of at our site today, astronomical alignment. And that's the core. You're looking kind of to the south, kind of in the direction of the sacrificial table. It is not in sight in that picture. You're kind of looking at the double storied building, and that's we call the plaza area. It's kind of a plaza, and there are chambers you can't behind you from where the photographer's standing, and off to the sides there are chambers too. So that's
this
kind
is
of
an amazing site, Dennis. There's so many different things. There's alignment.
I have a question.
Hi, Dr. Burton. You have a lot of interference in the background.
Oh, is it me, Jennifer, or?
No, it's Dr. Burton got a lot of interference in your background. You want to try?
Oh, I can hear it.
Yeah, Dr. Burton, can you try leaving the studio and coming back to see if that helps with the background noise?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll keep going through the pictures, but I mean, there's just so many things to talk about. Sacrificial tables, you got the windows, alignments, all these different dates that we just talked about that are in conjunction with this site. I mean, look at all these different things.
Yeah, you're right, Jennifer. And they come in a variety of shapes and sizes. That one right there, you're looking at, as you can see, it says a V-hut structure. It actually shaped like a letter V, if you will. It faces southwest. And it reminded me of what I read about in a Time Life magazine back in the 70s when I was just starting to do some traveling, and I was working on my flying, building hours and getting my different rating. A Time Life magazine around 76 did a thing about megalithic sites in Europe. And I didn't realize that there are so many. There's about 50,000 megalithic sites in Europe besides Stonehenge. And they, again, come in a variety of shapes and sizes. And that V-hut looks like wedge tombs. In fact, when we visited Ireland, my dad and I went over there for a week. We saw all sorts of like Newgrange and Knowth and Douth and Lacroix. And one of the things we wanted to see is a wedge tomb. So we saw some, I think, in County Meath. We're talking 1983, I think it was. So it's been a while. And they always face southwest in Ireland. And they shape kind of like a wedge or like a V. And they were used as tombs. And usually when you see them, the ones that are intact, some of them are missing the roofs over there. The rock work on the right, you can see a couple of slabs. You will see that with the chambers over there today. And it's almost like those were shutters to actually close up the chamber. Maybe once you put a body in there, maybe you closed it up for a while till the flesh left the bones, and then it was an old tradition, I guess, of doing that, putting a body in a chamber, letting the flesh go away, and then they take the bones out, put them somewhere else, and then they reuse the structure for that purpose. But it is the size, the shape, orientation. And I had some 3D pictures of ones in Spain. Spain is loaded with me. I've been to Spain, but not that west coast part of Spain, unfortunately. And they look like that too. They're so similar. And again, they have the stonework like that next to the entrance on the right side or left side. It's again like they were trying to close up the structure. It's speculation, I guess. But
do you think that maybe these could have been burial sites?
It's a possibility. Soil in New England is very acidic, so bones usually decompose within a few hundred years. And New Hampshire Archaeological Society occasionally finds some bones going back a few thousand years. My dad was a member of that. My uncle was a vice president of that group. And one of the ladies that worked for us for 32 years was a president of the New Hampshire Archaeological Society when she joined us in '89. She just retired. She's 92. But she talks about the bones not lasting. If you go to England, it's kind of chalky. Some limestone, I guess. And when we visited England, you can go to like the West Cannet Longborough. And they'll talk about bones they found there that go back, almost 5,000 years, roughly. And they're still there, They don't get eaten up like the New England conditions, But I think they could have been burial chambers. And these chambers were cleaned out by Mr. Goodwin, the first researcher, starting again in 1937. And the technology and their techniques would be rather crude compared to today's. They were looking for things you could hold in your hands, artifacts. They would dig, they would sift, but they didn't record things too precisely. And he cleaned out the V-hut. He cleaned out the chamber you're looking at right now, which is right next to the V-hut. And today's technology, and I'm probably behind on it right now, they could actually send the soil samples in and see if there's any chemicals that would indicate human burial there. I think calcium, potassium, there's some other chemicals. I'm sure there's something else that
like
they could
some
use.
of the eDNA. Were there kind of pottery or other items like what they would use for hunting or anything? Or any kind of sacrificial stuff, like leftover maybe ash from
if they cremated the bodies again, that's something probably in the 30s that could have escaped their attention, and they did not have radiocarbon dating until around 1950. In fact, we just got a carbon dating today in. It was of Mr. Goodwin again. His collection included a canoe from about 10 miles away, a dugout Native American canoe, and we had it in our possession since the late 50s when we opened, and we always wondered how old it is. They preserved it in linseed oil back in 1930s. We have like newspaper articles about it. It was found 10 miles from where we are in the Powwow River, and it was sunk with rocks. And today we got the message from a gentleman named Dr. Goodby. He's from Franklin Pierce College. He's a doctor of archaeology. He had a fund to actually start to date some of these canoes in New England, and he chose our canoe and 5 others. And we got the date back today after we've been kind of waiting almost for a few months. And as we were getting ready to leave today, it came up, and the date on the canoe came out 1670 up to about 1730, so between 300 and 360 years old. And that's really interesting. It's a transitional period. We were real excited to get it. We'll have to put that on the canoe now, the actual carbon dating of it. So we are still doing things at our site with carbon dating and another dating technique called optically stimulated luminescence. We had that done 5 years ago, and we got the results back 3 years ago. The oracle chamber roof, they took a dirt sample, and what they wanted to see was when that dirt saw the light of day last. And so they got a core. They did it in a darkroom environment. University of Washington's Dr. Feather came out and did it with 24 different people, including 2 from Brookhaven National Laboratory, 2 physicists. It took 2 years to get the results, and it looks like the dirt on the oracle chamber roof hadn't seen the light of day since 1550 AD, which is pre-colonial in our area, And Dr. Feather says, obviously, the chamber was already sitting there, and then the dirt accumulated or was shoveled up there at a later date. How much later is the question. So we've been doing that kind of testing, and we have one other sample that dated to 1400 on the end of a serpent tail.
Dennis, why do they call it the oracle chamber?
Yeah, because of the oracle tube. That 6-foot horizontal tube would be like an oracle could speak through it and give prophecy, give instructions, ask for donations, power over the, kind of like the Wizard of Oz kind of thing, if you would. They'll pay attention. Gotcha. That kind of fakery, but the people might be watching a ceremony on the table, and there's a platform opposite the oracle chamber. It's a platform that's about, your feet would be about 5 feet above the bedrock and above the table. So you're standing up kind of looking down at the table, and then behind that is the oracle chamber, which you can't see. It's all concealed, under earth. And the voice would come out, and the thought is that during a ceremony, a priest or priestess might be speaking to you during this ceremony. And again, it's pure speculation. We don't have a time machine to go back. We can't talk to the original people that used it. And we really don't know what cultural practice these people have, But it could work for that purpose. And I've seen other things around the world where they speculate too, even in Malta, and said, well, that's where a priest would speak, We weren't there at the time. That's the assumption, I guess. I don't think there's any written evidence of that. But that's what it seems to be, I think it's a ceremonial site. We don't think it's a place where people lived. It's not like the Flintstones and bedrock, and these chambers are used for that purpose. Right.
Dr. Burton, I think he's back. Do you have anything to add, Dr. Burton?
Yeah, I think, how's my audio sounding?
Oh, perfect. Yes.
Okay, good. And I was just fascinated listening to you, Dennis, about what you guys had uncovered diagnostically, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, there are more questions than there are answers to this place for all that we do know about it. But I'm of the mind that we need both, the on the ground view, and we also need the sort of out of the box thinking. So there's a place for conventional archaeology and for out of the box thinking here. We already know that even if people don't agree with the sort of Barry Phil approach to pre-Columbian America, even beside that, we have examples like the Clovis technology that was used in the Americas. Some of it has a lot of similarity to the Mysterian stone technology that was used in prehistoric Europe. which would more than suggest that there was travel across the Atlantic going back into prehistory. And so I say all that just to say, do you think what we may be looking at the American Stonehenge is perhaps an amalgam or the result of two cultures coming together and creating this observatory slash ceremonial center? In other words, are we looking at indigenous culture and cultures from across the Atlantic working together to make this?
That's a wonderful question, and I think the book is called Manitou. It came out in 1989 by Byron Dix and James Mavor Jr. There were two researchers in the New England area, and we saw Byron an awful lot. He was kind of instrumental in the astronomical research at our site in the mid 70s. He passed away only at 45 years old, and but the book came out, and it does talk about that idea that if it was old world visitors, there's so many sites throughout the Northeast that you'd have to have a fairly large population, or at least a very long time, to build all these structures, you know. But they kind of lean more towards Native American, you know. But they didn't rule out Europeans coming over here, and there was some sort of an assimilation, perhaps. And this is why we have a site that kind of has a European flavor. But when I look at the serpentine walls, and we know Native Americans were in New Hampshire now, going back 13,000 years, over in the Keene on the west side of New Hampshire near the Vermont, the Connecticut Lake and Vermont, just north of Massachusetts. They're finding that early time period with Native Americans in the White Mountains in New Hampshire. Our manager's been digging with a state archaeologist the last 2 summers up there, and they've done some woodland period, archaic, and they also found some paleo up in the White Mountains in New Hampshire, which, how did they survive during that time period when the glaciers were retreating? You know, it must have been pretty harsh. But yes, so we have to look at Native Americans for sure. There's a lot of oral tradition or talking about the sites being strange. That, like, there's a gentleman from the Wampanoag in Massachusetts. He's been to our site a couple times. He was actually on Hans Holzer, the Holzer Files show, and he gives his little talk. That show came out in 2021. And he says, this is not my people. He felt it was a different people. That he doesn't have any oral tradition that speaks of them building this. It doesn't mean that they didn't in ancient times and it's been forgotten, you know, but he didn't feel it was. And then a woman named...
Wasn't there some Greek...
Oh, I'm sorry.
DNA and the ancestry bones from the East?
Yeah. Oh, we have done some bones recently with DNA. They were found by Mr. Goodwin, and they were in the collection for almost 90 years. And they were actually DNA'd 2 years ago up at Thunder Bay at, I believe it's called Lake Point University. And we had 3 samples. They were from 3 different parts of the body. And in 1968, they were looked at by a woman down at the Smithsonian. One of the school teachers in New Hampshire brought the 3 bones down there to be looked at by the Smithsonian, and she was a physical anthropologist, Dr. Lucine, I think that's St. Hoyen, and she looked at them very carefully. And although they didn't have any DNA testing at the time, she goes, I believe these are human bones. She looked at the density, the hardness, I guess different features of the bones, and she said they're from 3 different parts of the body. I think these are human. So 55 years later, here we're having a DNA. Actually, 2 of them were DNA. The other one we kept in safekeeping. We sent them separately to Canada through customs. We didn't want to lose them. And it took about 2 months to get the results back. And it was interesting. They said they checked it against 39,500 different human, what do you call it?
Ancestry?
Yeah, well, actually just been, I'm missing a word. I apologize. 39,000 different people, if you will, or specimens, I guess might be the word. And it comes out it was actually Mediterranean, and specifically it was Greek ancestry. So that's interesting, you know. Is it ancient or is it more in the historical period, you know? That crosses your mind quickly. So then we sent out one of them to have it carbon dated by the same people we've been using since 1967. However, there was not enough mass for him to do the standard or conventional carbon dating. It wasn't enough mass or carbon. So he prepared them. He sent them down to the University of Arizona in Tucson. And about 4 months later, we got the results back, and the range was something like 1690 AD up to about 1900, 1850 was a meter. And that brought up more questions. You have we have a lot of history in the site. We don't know anybody that was in the Paddy family. They were there for almost 200 years. That was Greek, but obviously somebody was Greek. Maybe they had a friend that was Greek, but that person was found, the bones were found right in front of that east-west chamber, which is one of the pictures you had up there. Yes. And we have photographs from 1920, and it's just like bedrock, some soil, debris, bushes. There's no 6 feet, 4 feet, or 3 feet of dirt. There's only several inches of dirt. Why would you leave a person decomposing there, on the bedrock? So we have done DNA recently, and we did accelerated mass spectrometry at the University of Arizona in Tucson, did that. And that was interesting. It just added to the mystery of our site. Because the Paddy family were there, and you have somebody of Greek, ancestry that's actually, and then we thought, well, did a dog bring a bone up from some graveyard like a mile away is one of the closest graves? Or maybe there's some others that we don't know about that, unmarked graves, but it was from 3 different parts of the body, so it seems unlikely that a dog carried this bone up and left it there, because there are 3 different parts of the human body that these bones came from. And the 2 samples were related, either the same person or a very close relationship, probably the same person, we think, So we have done DNA on the site too. But again, the bones weren't ancient. I think if they were ancient, we wouldn't see them. They would just be dirt today, So that other type of testing would have to be done, checking chemicals, I think, So.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting data that you're pulling out of the site. I know recently you got some GPS drone data also.
Well, from the state of Texas, we're very thankful again. A gentleman was at the University of Arizona. He was a doctor of archaeoastronomy, actually, and he retired not too long ago. And he reached out to us late spring, early summer, and he introduced himself by email. And I've been thinking we need an astronomer. We haven't had an archaeoastronomer since the gentleman from Penn State, Dr. Winkler. And he was involved with our site from about late 97, I think, to 2001, when he suddenly passed away with a heart attack. Right after retirement, he passed away. So it's been a couple decades, and I've been thinking lately we really need to get a little bit more into the astronomy. And it just one of these things that seems to work out. He contacted us, and so we've been talking over the summer. And what he needs is really very, very accurate GPS, down to surveyor quality accuracy of where all these astronomical, the foresight, the back site, the astronomical alignments are located. And fortunately, last year we had a gentleman from a company called GPI. It's a company from Maine to Florida, but his office is located in Salem, New Hampshire. And this gentleman named Chris Stein, he's the one that actually does their LiDAR in the Northeast. They have another gentleman or woman down south that does it too. So he came on a tour with his girlfriend. She pulled him into our site, kind of, made him go. And once he was there, he went up, walked around in the fall a year ago, and he came back down, and my wife waited on him when he went up. When he came down, he introduced himself. He says, "You guys do LiDAR?" I told him about Tom Elmore and the handheld LiDAR. I told him about the old U.S. airplane drone they had done back around 2015. He goes, "Well, I got really, the latest equipment, and it does go down to about almost a centimeter accuracy now. 5 years ago, no, it was like, it was a meter, whatever. It wasn't very accurate. But he goes, now it's almost like Tom Elmore's handheld, which is very, very, accurate."
Yeah.
So he said, "I can do it." So he did it last year, but I told the Dr. Bob Ehrlich from Texas, I told him what we had, and we've been going back and forth, and he goes, "Well, I need RTK GPS. I never heard of RTK GPS. It's a whole new thing for me. It stands for real-time kinetics, and it can bring the accuracy again down to about surveyor quality accuracy, about a centimeter or so. So fortunately, this Chris got a piece of equipment from Colorado, the latest LiDAR, to use in a demo. He goes, "I'm going to do a place downtown Salem. It's a big new development, and I'll come back and do your place." And I told him what Dr. Bobby needed and everything. And eventually I got them talking directly to one another. That's much easier. These guys are tech guys, So anyway, he says, "I will bring my RTK up, and we'll do that at the same time." And he had all these GPS pads. He had a GPS pole, and he had the RTK, whatever. And he did the whole thing over. And he had one of these mysterious things that often happens at our site. When people do films up there and do different types of research, including one gentleman Tom Elmore brought up his 360 camera last year, brand new $15,000 360, whatever it was. And he got all the way up from Connecticut, 2-hour drive. He had them all charged up, 2 batteries or 3 batteries. He set it all up on our site, and the whole batteries, every battery was deader than the doornail. And he was astonished.
So strange. Like, to me, that's
it happens,
you know, and when Mark was over there, he mentioned that he had a battery drain on his camera too.
Oh, he told you that? Ah, okay, yes, yeah. And he's one of, we were just talking about that. Yeah, so Tom had to go all the way back home and come back and do it.
Isn't this on a ley line though? Is there quartz there too?
Yes, there is quartz crystals and there's quartz. And in fact, one of the chambers called the Watch House is a fascinating chamber. It's a satellite chamber from the main site. It's located about 300 feet from the main site. It's one of the first things you see when you come to our site and begin the tour. And the more we know about the chamber, the more interesting. It's a big glacial boulder with a chamber built next to it. There are about 50 of those style in New England, with a boulder on the right, the entrance on the left. Gunjewamp down in Connecticut, it's a 250-acre site near the Navy base, and that has a chamber like that also. Boulder on the right, structure on the left. And inside that, I mentioned bones being brought down from the main site. There are bones actually were taken out of there about 1958-59, and in 68, they were brought down with those 3 human bones. And when Dr. Lucy, what's her name, St. Hoyen, she looked at him and says, "I think these are bison," you know. But she showed him to her male counterpart, who was more into the animals. And he looked at him and goes, "Yeah, I think this is bison. And she goes, "Yeah, but they're from New Hampshire." And he goes, "Well, there was a thing called the woodland bison." So these bison bones were found inside that watch house. Also, what was found in that watch house around that time was a stone shaped like our summer solstice sunset on a very small scale. It looks like a piece of slate with a hole drilled in it, and a piece of bone about an inch or so long, about the same size as a stone, and it has a drill hole. We think these are stone and bone pendants, and they were inside the chamber, so that may have preserved them a little bit better. But I think, oh yes, you're looking at the watch house with the illumination. So in the back wall of that watch house is a quartzite stone. You mentioned quartz,
yes,
and then we have the well of quartz crystals. And since we did a forest management program starting in 2019 in the winter, and it ran into the spring of 2021, and they did it only during the winter months. They came up and they thinned out the entire forest. They opened up the alignments more, and they opened up the alignment where the sunlight can actually go into the watch house for the first time. And what it does on the equinox sunrise, about starting at 7:30, it starts to illuminate that quartzite stone in the back wall. It not only illuminates it, but it actually shaped to the bottom of the stone has a point, kind of a A shaped upside down, and the shadow light actually frames it perfectly. And 30 minutes later, at 8 o'clock in the morning on the equinox, it goes to the top with the shadow and light framing the top of the stone. And 30 minutes later, right there, that one you have up there, that's at 8:30, and it actually looks like at the bottom right side, it looks like a hand with the index finger pointing back at the quartzite stone. And what I thought is, this is the chamber represents the womb, and the sunlight coming in from the sun, the male rays coming in, fertilizing this quartzite stone like an egg. And it's a 1-hour illumination. And that's inside the watch house. And that's only been known about since 2020. I had a friend from Texas that was up with her Sunseeker app, and I just began hearing about those in 2019. They were out for a while. And she held it up inside the chamber, and she goes, whenever you clear these trees out, I think at 9 o'clock in the equinox, roughly, you're going to see an illumination where the sunlight will strike that stone. And she was offering her time just a little bit, and I called her back, or I sent a message to her 1 year later on the equinox. I said, and I sent her pictures. I said, look what you predicted. It works. It's so cool.
Yeah,
Dennis,
yeah.
Dennis, that is an effect not terribly dissimilar from what you have at Newgrange in Ireland. When I visited Newgrange, we just missed the spring equinox, I think is the alignment there. We had just missed that.
It's a midwinter though, sunrise.
Okay.
And then I think Nelther-Delta, the equinox. I think Nelther-Delta. I think it is. Yeah.
But the quartz lights up And there's a similar kind of womb fertilization motif that could certainly be interpreted at Newgrange. Wow, that's fascinating. I did not know that about America's Stonehenge.
And that's a great analogy you mentioned, because we do bring up Newgrange, and I think the Newport Tower in Rhode Island has an egg shape over one of the arches, and the Lake Shore window box in the winter solstice, which again is coming up this Sunday. And one of our friends is going to go down there and watch it. Hopefully the weather's good. And that's a much later. Some people suggest in the 14th. That's a very controversial tower in Newport, Rhode Island. It's been on History Channel and stuff. But that same morning, by the way, there's caves out in Colorado called Pathfinder and Crack Creek. They're not well known, but they're caves. And there's artwork inside. And one of the art pieces, a petroglyph, petroglyph is a serpent carving in both chambers. And on the equinox, the same morning, because it's a different time zone, the sunlight goes into the chamber, into the cave, and they modified it somewhat. And then they put the carvings, and there's a shadow and light of the serpent being split in half. We've been to Chaco Canyon too, and they have the sun dagger, as you probably know, the summer solstice. I think it's 1 sun dagger, winter solstice 2, and the 9 spirals.
Yeah,
but on the equinox, right, exactly, yeah. And I wish we could have. They don't let you up there, but. On the equinox is a serpent carving, again, like the ones in Colorado, and the serpent is shadow and light split that same morning as ours. And our watch house, by the way, that boulder, we believe is the head of a 2,550-foot serpent. And I think there's a picture of that somewhere there. Down in out in California, there's one called Mojave North Cave. It does the same thing as those other 3 caves. And then you go to Chichen Itza. We were there back in 84 or 5 when we could climb it, actually. 91 steps, and then Kukulkan comes down the steps on the equinox, I think, towards sunset. So there's a serpent and equinox thing going on all the places, including ours, I don't know the connection, but I just throw that out there, Be kind of Facebook time that across, put that on Facebook time if people could be in different locations doing it, although they are in different time zones, obviously, too, But Newgrange is a great example. We do talk about that one too. We were there, I think in 83, I think it was. My dad and I went there.
Yeah, there's lots of stuff there. The spirit windows, serpentine walls. What do you think about some of the damage or the loss of history attributed to the Victorian quarry guys?
Yeah, that was probably during the time of the Paddies. Jonathan was a shoemaker, 5 generations. He was also a road surveyor, because he had 11 kids. He had 9 daughters and 2 sons, so he had a house full. But he also was a tax collector. Around 1800, for 3 years, he was a tax collector. So he's doing all these things to bring in extra income. And by 1830, he was an empty nester pretty much from what we gather. And he started taking in the town paupers. And I have the actual handwritten book. I don't think the town of Salem knows I have this. And it starts in 1831 or whatever. And this Jonathan and other people put in their bid too, and they won. I guess you bid to take in paupers, the people that can no longer care for themselves. And he had up to 11 of them living in his wooden house on top of the site. So he made money doing that until 1837. The town of Salem has a poor farm, I guess, and he no longer is involved with the paupers. But he starts to get involved with the Underground Railway, with the slaves coming through, that whole thing. We have it was all done in secrecy, but we do know that a gentleman named Mr. Donald, Mr. Poor, and Mr. Hussey with a horse named Nellie would come up from Shawshene Village in Massachusetts at night and bring the slaves, and they would temporarily probably stay in the wooden house. And the wooden house is to the right of this picture you have here. We're looking north, and it's kind of a rectangular stone foundation. We think was actually a courtyard. And Tom's LiDAR, plus us looking at it a little more closely, that is not a rectangular foundation. It's actually trapezoidal in shape. We have found 5 trapezoidal shapes. The table groove, there's a niche to the left of the sacrificial table. It's like a stone area with 2 little niches, if you will. It's like an alcove, we call it. It's actually, it's not in the picture. It's behind with the person standing in the camera, so it's just out of the frame. And it's actually trapezoidal, the floor plan. Again, the groove on the table is trapezoidal. The chamber in ruins, which is a big chamber with a huge roof slab collapsed into it. We found out that whole floor plan is trapezoidal in shape, and the patty chamber is. There's a chamber in Plastow, New Hampshire. It's on my daughter-in-law's mother's property, believe it or not. What a coincidence. It's called the Plastow Chamber. We've been going there since the 60s off and on. We went into it last year, and we actually measured the front and back of the chamber, and we found it was trapezoidal shape. It is not rectangular. It's trapezoidal. It's not off by just a couple centimeters or so. It's significant enough that it was intentional, we think. So we're interested in the trapezoidal shape. That's just something that's kind of new to us, you know. So that's the plaza area. The background, you can see a wooden roof, a roof. That's the astronomical center of all the alignments at our site, except for the watch house illumination, and one other illumination is not from that platform. So that's where two cairns were located. These two cairns were piles of rocks. Mr. Goodwin diagrammed them, they photographed them, and then they destroyed them. He thought they were part of the oracle chamber, and they were not connected. He thought they were hollow, like beehives in Ireland. In fact, in one of his books, The Ruins of Great Ireland, New England, he's got some of the, I think up in the islands they use on the latest, not the last Indiana Jones, the one before last, I guess. They actually were on the island, and Skywalker was there, Luke Skywalker. The famous
Skellig Michael.
That's it. And he thought that was what these things resembled exactly, and they're in his book, 1946 book. And so when I saw Indiana Jones, hey, that's the ones that Goodwin used, you know. Well, they were not. And what we found out, we got pictures of him with a big tripod of wood with a winch, and they're lifting up, his crew are lifting up the rocks from these two cairns in the late 1930s, and they used them to rebuild part of a wall near the sacrificial, that ramp area I mentioned, and we can see him doing that. He did not know he was actually destroying the astronomical center. This was not known until around 1975, when we had already started surveying with a professional surveyor, Charlie Pearson of Beverly Pearson and Associates. We hired him in 1973, and he surveyed the astronomical alignments over 5 years. And the reason it took so long is it was we had to budget it. And we're always tight on money at the museum, so we had a budget at each year. We gave him, this is what we can afford this year. By 77, he completed the 16 acres, and we found that the astronomical center, I think the second year we were already aware that those two cairns were the actual astronomical center of the site, which Mr. Goodwin unfortunately, destroyed 40 years before that. Charlie Pearson's still around. He just retired from survey work 3 years ago. Coincidentally, he came up this fall with his family. And he goes, what's going on? And I told him, now he's kind of in the loop with the Dr. Bobby Ehrlich from Texas, because Charlie's the one that really did all the all the accurate survey work really on the alignments from 73 to 77. And then he did more in the 80s too. But he's really interested in all this tech stuff and everything. He goes, all this stuff is replacing surveyors, the GPS and all this stuff, but he's really into it. And so he's been in the loop of us doing conversations. He's CC'd and everything and been chirping in with different ideas and stuff like that. So what we're going to do is give Dr. Bobby all the data we can, and then he can start his processing and looking at solar. He wants to go through all the solar. Again, he wants to go through all the lunar, and then he wants to go through the star alignments. And he worked on the Great Pyramid of Egypt recently. He sent us all that data. It was pretty interesting what he found. And he did some stuff on Oak Island, which is, that Oak Island's been, what he did looks interesting. But if you do his bio and everything, he has a really good bio. He was a tenured professor, and I think he's well respected from everything we've gathered. My wife is kind of always critical, and she thought he look. We kind of do a little background check to make sure people are, who they say they are, kind of thing.
So we're getting up on, I guess, close to the end there. Dr. Burton, did you want to give any other questions or comments about America's Stonehenge to the folks listening?
Yeah, I had a quick question about you mentioned that the serpentine connections with the site. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that? I know you said that there was one chamber that you was a head of a serpent.
Right. Yeah, the serpent thing is new to us since I retired in 2016. I found my first one when I was out in the woods on my ATV, and I had seen this wall before. And this day, it just happened to strike. It was on the way to where my dad used to live, as a matter of fact, through the woods. And I looked at it. I got off my ATV, walked 65 feet to it. I'm looking at it. And the spring of 2016, I'm like, and I just retired from America, so I had more time on my hands. I'm like, this seems to have a head. It seems to have a tapered body. It's on a ridge of bedrock and it has a big, what I considered was a tail. It was a big rectangular stone, probably about 3.5 feet long. It had a little rounded corners, but it was rectangular in shape. And I said, am I looking at a serpentine shape? I started showing it to other people. And in the meantime, during that summer, we started finding other possible serpentine. And by the end of that year, I think we had about 4 or 5. We went to a meeting in Groton, Connecticut, again at New England Antiquity Research Association Spring Meeting 2017. And a gentleman named Mark and Starr from North Stonington, Connecticut, had written a book, Ceremonial Stonework, where he thinks Native Americans are highly involved with this. There's 8,000 chambers in North Stonington. We knew that Connecticut's loaded. We talked about Moodus, Danbury, Groton, Connecticut, Thompson, Salem, all over. Never heard of North Stonington having any structures. There's 8,000 of them. He's been there 30 years as of 2016. He writes for Yankee Magazine. He's a book writer of fishing villages. So he finally put this thing together. In the back of his book, 270 photographs, 8,000 structures, 25 categories. As I'm flipping through the book, this is before he spoke, the serpentine thing came up. And by then we probably had a half dozen. One of the categories is serpentine walls. And he has over 400 of these. They have a head, they have a body, and they have a tail. They can be linear, they can be rectilinear, kind of like this. They can be curvilinear, and we have all of these. And we have 3 at our site we think of the Ouroboros, with a serpent biting its tail, including the watch house, although the tail at the watch house seems to be more in front of it. These serpents go all the way out to Weed, California by Mount Shasta, and they have chevron patterns and zigzag patterns like we have at our site in North Stonington and other sites. They're in Massachusetts, in Rhode Island. Markham Star says they're a little bit more curvier in Rhode Island. They're in Kentucky. In fact, one of them in Kentucky, I saw a Stonewall woman reported on 1990, had a big wide mouth, kind of like the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio, which we've been to, but that's made out of earth. And one of ours has a big white mouth, and it looks like it's going into the swamp at our site. And Markham Star says some of them in North Stonington come out of the water. Some are heading into the water. They're out in Winnipeg, Canada, and Parks, Canada, supposedly working on, because a couple came down last year. The sister moved to New Hampshire. I'm talking fast right now because I know it's the end of the show. And she goes, I have turtle effigies and I have serpent wall serpents that can't. I said, oh my God, you got them there too. After Mark spoke at that meeting, a woman from Denver spoke with her 2 male colleagues, and she's showing cairns, chambered cairns. She's showing D-shaped walls, which we have at our site in North Stonington, big wall patterns shaped like the letter D. Then she starts to show her serpent walls. So east of Denver, where we've been in the air, it's very, very flat below Nebraska. She has actually stonework there. When we drove through there, I didn't see any rock at all. It's all ranch land, you know. They're in Alabama, and a gentleman down in Jacksonville State University, Harry Holstein, I think is his name, and I contacted him 5 or 6 years ago. He's been working on his serpent walls, he calls rattlesnake walls, since the 1970s. So he's aware of what we have now. So the serpentine's big. Is it Draco, the constellation in the northern hemisphere? We don't know. But we have 16 of them at our site.
We need to talk more, Dennis. We need to talk more.
We need to have another show, y'all.
Yeah. Well, if you ever want to get together some dates, I mean, I love talking to both of you. I think we do have to talk some more. This stuff is across the whole North American continent. So we thought our site was just a North Salem, New Hampshire thing, you know, with a few other sites around it back when my dad got involved. Some of these features go right across the continent, right into Canada, you know. So there's a couple in Ontario, Canada, by the way. They say serpent. I haven't seen them yet, so I'd like to see them before I make too much comment about them. But so, Winnipeg, definitely. Yep.
Dennis, for the people listening on UPRN around the world, do you want to give a shout out to where people can find you and your work with America's Stonehenge?
Sure. Yeah, we have a website at stonehengeusa.com. There's the 11-minute theater film, and they can actually pull that free mobile app download, and you can do a complete virtual tour of our site when you do it. And if you use it on our site on your cell phone, you walk around, it talks to you, pictures and text. We're on YouTube, you know, or on TikTok. But on the website, there's a phone number there. You can call us, and there's also there's that email. address too. And we welcome all of that. You know, we try to answer what we can answer, you know, when people send us questions. So we love doing that too.
And if
we're
you
open every
look
day.
on the bottom of the ticker, I have your websites pulled up down there too.
Perfect.
So
Thank you
folks
so much. Yeah.
can find you there. And Dr.
Yep.
Burton, do you want to give a shout out to folks where people can find you with Burton Beyond and the Institute?
Sure. People can find me at burtonbeyond.net. I'm on Facebook, YouTube, and X, and working on a new website for the Institute. That should be along pretty soon. So if you want to follow my work, they can follow me there.
Okay, perfect. And Dr. Burton's information is pulled up also on the bottom of the ticker. So I want to thank both of you for coming on today. We can talk a lot about this topic. There's so many different things that I didn't even get to ask. So maybe we'll have you back on again, Dennis.
Oh,
I
thank
want
you
to
so
thank
much.
you again for being on, and I'm going to...
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you both.
Yeah,
I really
no, go
appreciate
ahead.
it. And I can't wait to get back on again sometime. Thank you both. It was a pleasure.
And you're listening on UPRN 107.7 FM in New Orleans and 105.3 FM on that Gulf. And we're going to leave you with a little bit of 80s bog team music. And thanks again, everybody, for listening in to America's Stonehenge with Dennis Stone and Dr. Judd Burton.